Welcome to Royally Unfiltered, the show that takes you behind palace gates like never before. This is where tradition meets truth and nothing is off limits. This week, helping me tackle all the biggest headlines is former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II. And you also worked with King Charles III as Prince Charles, Dickie Arbiter. I'm so excited to talk to you today, and I even might see you in a month's time. So this is a prep. This is a bit of a prep. So I
This is a
know.
rehearsal.
Yeah, this is a rehearsal, exactly. Let's talk about. I was telling you how beautiful your tie is. The king also has gorgeous ties. And this week at a garden party, he wore a tie with submarines on it. It was so sweet. You have to tell me all about garden parties because I don't know what they're for. As what is the ultimate objective when the king and Queen Camilla throw a garden party? Explain that to me.
Okay, let me go for the ties first. The way the story was presented, I mean, I'm going to talk about ties because I wear funny ties too. The way the story was presented, it was if it's something new, but it's not anything new. He's been wearing ties with a motif on it since the late 80s, early 90s. And he's got several owl and pussycat ties in various colors.
Oh,
So it's nothing new. He just likes that sort of thing. It's slightly quirky. It's different. He was wearing a morning suit to the garden party, which is what the royals do and what a lot of guests do. And he just put this tie on with submarines. He's worn ties with zebras, with sailing boats on them, with owl and pussycat. You name it. He's worn those ties. The idea of a garden party is really twofold. One, for the king and the queen to meet people, meet ordinary people, not the great and the good, not people who work in politics and who run multi-million pound or multi-million dollar companies, but people who work at the coalface. This is important to them. This is what the walkabouts are all about when they go around the country. So at this particular garden party, it was about people who work in education, education for special needs children, people who work in education vis-a-vis charities. And these are people who are teachers, who are teaching assistants, who just work in education. So yeah, they move around and they talk to as many people as possible. And one way of saying thank you to what they're doing and to recognize what they're doing, because they don't often get recognition,
mhm.
is to invite them to a garden party. The weather was good, which made a change because if the weather is awful, it's pretty awful on the gardens of Buckingham Palace. But this particular day, it was good. The king and queen enjoyed themselves meeting people. They love meeting people. This was one of his frustrations when it was first announced that he had a cancer last year. He has three roles: head of state, head of nation, head of the Commonwealth. He was able to fulfill his role as head of state. That's his constitutional duty, by working behind palace walls, not out in the open, not meeting people, by dealing with government papers. His role as head of nation is going out in the country, meeting people, meeting industrialists, meeting people working on the coalface, whether it's in mining, in industry, on the railways, whatever, you name it. They enjoy meeting those people. And head of the Commonwealth, well, he is head of the Commonwealth of Nations, 56 nations. He attended the first Commonwealth Conference in Samoa last October in his own right as head of the Commonwealth. First time he had done that. He'd been there before on behalf of his mother, but this was the first time he went in his own right. So going back to garden parties, this was a special one for people working in education. They have usually three garden parties a year at Buckingham Palace. Something like between 7,000 and 10,000 people are invited. Again, not necessarily the great and the good. Yes, there are certain enclosures where some MPs are invited. The diplomatic corps are invited because it's a way of the sovereign soft diplomacy saying thank you for their services to their country and representing their country in the United Kingdom. But it's about meeting real people, meeting somebody who's a corporal or a private in the army or an able seaman in the navy or a constable in the police force, a teacher, school dinner ladies, cleaners, nurses, you name it, these sort of people are invited. They are recommended by, we have in each county, we had Lord Lieutenants. They represent the Crown and they are working very closely with the local authority. And they recommend people who should be invited to the garden party. And as I said, between 7 and 10,000 people are invited. So it's a lot of people that they cater for. And then there's always one up in Scotland at the Palace of Holyrood House, just for the same reason. But on the King's Garden parties, which are the three that I mentioned, they draft in other members of the royal family to ease the burden. So every member of the royal family is there. The Waleses, the Edinburghs, Princess Royal, sometimes the Duke of Kent, although he does have mobility issues, certainly the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. And they push themselves out to the people and talk to people. They don't hide and talk to the great and the good. They are meeting real people, and they love it. The royals love it. The people love it. And it's quite special for them to receive that invitation. You're commanded by His Majesty and invited to a garden party on such and such a date. So it's quite important to not only the sovereign and the Queen, but also to the people who are invited. And there's Robert Jobson.
And Robert Jobson, our own garden party has started. Hi, Robert.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just filing something. I did forgot all about it for a minute, but there we are. Do apologize.
Well, Dickie, have you been to a garden party? Have you been able to enjoy a garden party, or have you worked a garden party?
Well, work is work is not onerous when you go to a garden party. On occasions, I've had to look after film crews at a garden party. But yes, I've been to so many garden parties. I'm being blasé about it now. I'm sure Rob's been to garden parties as well.
Yeah, I'm going to one on Tuesday.
Well, there you are. You see, they are fun. They're lovely to go to. Rob's going to be there working, I'm sure. But
Yeah, I've been there. I've been there as a guest. I went there with my mum once actually, and she managed to drop her entire the contents of her handbag in front of Richard Aylard, which was mortified at. But I don't know how she managed to do it. But she was most so he didn't seem to mind, so it was fine.
But your mum enjoyed it, didn't she?
Yeah, she really did enjoy it. She had a really great time, and it was fun to take her actually, to be honest. Yeah.
That is so sweet. You lost your mom last year, Robert?
Yeah, yeah, I did. Yeah, in October. So she did remember it. And I think that's the point with garden parties, as Dickie was saying, is that it's for people that people like me and him. It's probably a bit blasé. We've worked there, we've been invited, etc. But for the normal people just doing their everyday lives, it's a great moment. It's not just for the politicians and the great and the good. It's for the general public who have done good things in the local communities.
Well, I wish I could remember the exchange word for word, Dickie, but one woman that was at this recent garden party, one of the 7,000 that was there, said that the king made a beeline to her because she was wearing a dress that were in Zimbabwe colors. And he said,
Nigeria.
was it nice? Oh my gosh.
Nigeria.
Fix
He
that in
said
edit. Fix
he
that in
went, he went.
edit.
That's all right. He went straight to her and said, "You're Nigerian, aren't you?" And she said,
Yeah.
"Yes."
Yes. And she,
That's the sort of thing he would recognize. And he's been to
yes.
Nigeria several times, so it's not something that would be alien to him.
That is so sweet, and it just gives you the sense that he is so aware of it. He's so aware of everything going on around him and curious about everything that's going on around him. He's not a stickler.
He's a very good communicator, and he looks as though he's really enjoying the role. Yes, he's got this threat of a cancer over him. He's having treatment once a week, but he's getting out there and he's enjoying every moment, not just of the job, but also meeting people. And he's smiling all the time.
Absolutely. All right, less happy story. I apologize, Robert. I'm gonna ask. I can't wait to get your opinion on this because sometimes you get really tough, and when you get really tough, I really appreciate it. So, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has condemned Britain's decision to invite President Trump for a second state visit, arguing that it undercuts his government's attempt to present a united stance against the president's comments about taking over Canada. Now, King Charles, who again, Dickie mentioned this earlier, but remains in cancer treatment, is scheduled to attend Canada's state opening of Parliament on May 27th, marking the first time a British monarch has taken part in the event since 1977. But in an interview with Sky News, Carney was specifically asked about British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's move in February to use his visit with Donald Trump to hand the president an invitation from the monarch for a second state visit to London. And he said, I think, to be frank, they, Canadians, weren't impressed by that gesture given the circumstance. It was at the time when we were being quite clear about the issues surrounding sovereignty. Um, I feel like there are so many moving parts right now when it comes to tariffs and when it comes to this new presidency, that any sort of kindness is a pretty decent strategy, in my personal opinion. You're just trying to figure out where Trump's going to land, and you're trying to tiptoe around him.
Number one, Carney wasn't even prime minister at the time of that invitation, so that's the reality of that. Was I mean, Carney is always going to understand his position and understand the position of Canada, but at that particular time, I think Starmer was in need of something to win over or get certain benefits from Trump. That was seen as a masterstroke at the time by people close to the government, and it's the government that would have done the moving and shaking on that invitation, not the king. And so I think it was a move that they did at the time. I actually thought it was a bit cringy the way it was done, but everyone thought it was good at the time. Now I can understand Canada's position, but I think the king, as Dickie was saying there, is going through the care that he's going through, but he's making a 48-hour flight to Canada to do this state opening, and I think that is a clear gesture of support and clear gesture of the sovereignty of Canada at the same time. So it's a game of politics. It's a game. It's a game that is played. And the king is part of that political game, and he's making it very clear by that flight that Canada's going nowhere. It's not going to be anyone's 51st state. And if you look at the narrative, I'm sure that Carney and his people know exactly that's the case, and he's playing, of course, to his electorate in that he's just been elected in Canada. So, look, I think it's a game of politics. The king is caught in the middle, but there's no doubt that he supports the sovereignty of Canada, and the fact that he's making that flight and going to be doing that statement is a message to America, basically hands off.
Robs is absolutely right in what he says. Unfortunately, the king being constitutional king, he takes the advice of his ministers and his prime minister. And on this particular occasion, he's been caught in the crosshairs. He will do the job that he's required to do, a state opening of Canada's parliament, and he will come home. And if Trump throws his toys out of his pram, then so be it. He needs his big boy's pants on.
Well, I don't think he will. I mean, at the end of the day, Trump is playing the game where he's playing a businessman's game half the time with these tariffs. One minute he's saying we're going to whack you with them, and then he takes them away, and then you've got a better deal than you had before. Some people say it's a victory. I think that you've got to be clear that King, after their row in the White House with Zelensky and JD Vance and Trump himself, I think the king had Zelensky um, over to Sandringham, and I think that was another clear statement by the king. At the same time, playing within the constitutional parameters of what his role is. But he wasn't shying away from the issue. He's again saying, I've shown support for Zelensky in Ukraine before. I will continue to do so. And it's clear, that the sovereignty of Canada is something that matters deeply to him. I mean, wasn't it the Queen Mother during the 1939 visit went over and a Scottish veteran asked her whether she was Scottish or English as queen, and she replied, "Oh, well, I'm Canadian." At this moment in time, and now I'm here. I'm Canadian because, of course, she was Queen of Canada. So I think it's very important, the sovereignty issue, and I think it's something that either Trump and his administration are playing games with because they understand. They understand the sovereignty of the country, and so does the king, and he's using his position to make a statement to America and the Trump administration.
Dickie, it's too early to discuss legacy, but there is a piece of me that feels like King Charles, is just kind of a peacemaker, that he's just a kind man that wants everybody to be friendly with each other. Am I overstepping by assuming that's the type of man he is?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I think you've got it spot on. What is quite interesting, whatever Trump does, whatever bad things he does, and few good things, he's desperate to come to the UK for a second state visit. that is more important than anything else. As Rob says, yeah, he's a wheeler dealer, he's a businessman, and everything is treated like a business. I've got a good deal here, I've got a good deal there. It doesn't matter how many people are being killed, but he's out to make a deal. He's desperate to come to the UK, and he will melt in front of the king
Yeah.
because the king is very good with people. And if he feels that the time is to disarm him, he will disarm him. He won't know he's being disarmed, but he's very clever like that.
That
Yeah,
is,
I think there is. I think there's a bit of legacy building going on as well, though, Lindsay, because I do think if you look at what the King did in COP and when he went out to the UAE, the speeches that he's made in Germany, France, and Italy, and I think that when he went to Kenya too, I think there's been a lot of probably a bit stronger in terms of the speeches that would be made, and also I think he's certainly. Quite I think he's very much a statesman in a world where we're a bit devoid of them at the moment. We've got a lot of dictators, it seems to me, or people that seem to be running countries without democratic mandate, but we don't have many statesmen. And I think, given his experience over the last 50 years or more as Prince of Wales and the way that he's, I think, acted on the world stage. He's somebody who I can, for want of a better word, and for using Dickie's surname as well, he's an arbiter. I think he's somebody who I think is able to bring people together to get a good discussion going and to try to be on the side of the angels, which I think that ultimately that is what he's trying to achieve in the short space of time he's got as king. He won't be a very long-serving king, rather like Edward the Seventh. Edward the Seventh was seen as a great peacemaker actually in his time, and we had the all the Collier with the French, and I do think that the king is somebody that is not necessarily looking to build a legacy, but he's certainly achieving that.
Dickie, before we started recording, I made a promise to you that I don't think I'm capable of keeping. So I apologize for bringing up Harry and Meghan. But when we discuss this peacekeeper legacy, when we discuss the peacekeeper brand of King Charles, it truly is actions speak louder than words. And risking a lot, and on a huge world platform, the king is trying to be this peacemaker and impact the world in such an incredible way. It's kind of a situation where you sit back and go, maybe the royal family isn't the problem, because in other categories or in other parts of their lives, I see them peaceful. I see them trying to reconnect, and I see them trying to heal other rifts.
Yeah, well, when Harry was over and he lost his appeal about security, he made the point in an interview that he does want to reconcile with the family. But how do you reconcile with a family when whatever you say to your family is then broadcast on all the American networks and published in all the American newspapers? You can't actually trust him to be private, to be discreet. And until such time he learns to be private and discreet, there's going to be no reconciliation. The king's got far more important things to do in terms of the United Kingdom, the people of the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, than trying to reconcile with somebody who thinks he wants to reconcile, but has rubbished the family on the way. And right at the end, where he has finished rubbishing the family, said everything he wanted to say, then he wants to say sorry, or he wants the family to say sorry to him. They have nothing to apologize for. He's the one that's to apologize, and he needs a little bit of humility. But as long as he's married to Meghan, humility ain't in his dictionary, in his vocabulary.
I
No.
think that Dickie's right. I think the reality is, though, instead of giving an interview to the BBC, and I thought the BBC failed terribly as broadcasters in holding up to actually justify some of the things he was saying, like this is an establishment stitch up. He's got no evidence of any of it. But the fact here, I think that should have started that interview with saying, I apologise to my father, I apologise to my family, and I apologise to the British people, rather than saying, I love my country, I love this. Other. The reality is, he's not showing any love for his country. He's disrespecting the head of state, his father, the king. And I think it's time that if he wants to start building bridges, he has to start with a fulsome and public apology to not only to the king and the family, but to the people who actually supported him. And his wife, who actually paid for a vast amount of his wedding, who actually paid for the security throughout his life, and to start being a little bit more, to actually start to realise that he's got to give back and win trust back if he's got any chance whatsoever of a reconciliation. But we'll have to wait and see. I hope one day there would be, but he has to apologise first.
Yeah, you can see in those new YouGov numbers too that his brand has taken such a dive since that BBC interview. Um, Dickie, you know protocol. You know how these people are trained behind closed doors. I think the that entire interview was ill-advised, but the one line that completely threw me off was when he said, "I don't know how much longer my father has to live."
Well, that was outrageous.
Yeah, surely he's been trained to know what to say and what not to say. And as a 40-year-old man who's lived his life in the public eye, knows that how a line like that could be taken
He knew what he was doing, yeah.
and
He knew
manipulated
exactly
all
what
over
he
the
was
world.
doing. He's not the brightest bunny on the planet. Yes, he learned how to fly a helicopter. A lot of people learn to fly helicopters. It's a bit like driving a car, a bit more complicated. You learn where the knobs are, you learn what the dials do, and you go and fly the thing. No, but what he said was absolutely outrageous. And obviously, that is something that would have hurt not just his father, but the wider family as well.
I
It's
just
like it's like Kinsey. He said that his father and his brother were trapped. Deeply personal, deeply making a statement that they don't agree with. This is even worse because the palace have done their best to try to make sure that the king can get on with his job. But we do know he's living and serving, with cancer, which is not an easy thing. He is being treated for chemotherapy, which is incredibly debilitating. But he's doing a great job. Now, the suggestion is, of course, that somehow, and it's quite possible that Harry has more information than the general public. But at this moment in time, that's not what the palace or what the public want the king spread out about the king when the king's trying to do the best job he can possibly do. And he's once again, undermining his king and undermining his country, as well as letting down his father. And I was shocked by that. But then again, I thought, that's clearly been the main thing he wants to throw in because he knows what a headline is. He knows how to get a headline. And that was clearly a headline.
in the States, the headlines were very much too Prince Harry wants reconciliation. And I just thought to myself, I don't think that the person that wrote that headline watched all 30 minutes of that interview.
No,
He just
he
wants
says, "Give me what I want."
to,
He's back like a child, throws all his, toys out the pram. Give me what I want. Give me what I want. But he just doesn't seem to understand that every time he does this and shows off a little tantrum that he does, that he's actually pushing people further and further away.
He's pushed them so far away that is there any chance of a return? You had Oprah, you had 6 hours of Netflix, you had the book,
Yeah.
and in all those three things, he rubbished the family. How would he expect the family to reconcile without a public apology? And he just doesn't know how to make a public
But Dickie,
apology.
that's the only
That is,
thing he can start. He has to be the starting point. And that interview with the BBC, frankly, was his only opportunity. I can't see another one actually of saying, "Look, I've got this wrong." That was costing the British taxpayer money. That court case. They're fighting. He was against the Home Office, and I just think he owes so many people an apology. But you can only start. The only way you can start is by a public apology. But he came back and said, "Well, I'll accept their apology." It's just, ridiculous, really, just
but the
utterly
BBC
ridiculous.
should hang their heads in shame
I
too,
agree with that.
because
Yeah, yeah,
not once did they challenge him.
yeah. And
They
that
just
is,
allowed him
with
to
Oprah, you
rabbiting
can
on.
understand it a bit because it's celebrity. It was all done as a celebrity interview. I get that, but the BBC, gee whiz, that was appalling journalism. I thought.
well, the I did feel like he contradicted himself when you talk about the British people and just kind of some sort of forgiveness, even from the public. She asked him, "Do you miss your country? Do you love your country?" Something.
Yeah.
And he's like, I do, even though they treated me a certain way. Like it has this, I do,
Oh, it's
but
everybody else's fault, not his.
yeah, I do, but, and it's like, no, just say, yes, I love and I miss my country. That's all you have to say. Why do you have to say anything else? It's just, I don't think he,
He doesn't think he's done anything wrong, Kinsey. He really genuinely, in his, kitchen summits he must have with Meghan, they must just sit there and say, we're both so right and everyone's so wrong, because he doesn't see he's done anything wrong. And that's the problem, I think.
I just am so jealous of this delusional world that they
Yeah,
live
yeah.
in. I'm just so envious. Well, we did see a very healthy, gorgeous looking Catherine, Princess of Wales, this week. She presented this year's Queen Elizabeth II Award for Design to Patrick McDowell. And it was just fun to see the Princess of Wales. This is the second time she's presented this award by the British Fashion Council and the British royal family. They created this to recognize the role of London's fashion industry. All of my cutest clothes come from London, by the way. Um, I get excited whenever I see the Princess of Wales because at the beginning of this year, earlier when we found out that she was in remission, the palace tried to control our expectations by saying, don't be expecting to see the Princess of Wales very often. This is going to be a gradual return. So Dickie, it is so wonderful to see her in the Victoria Beckham pantsuit she wore. She looked fierce in it, and this is kind of a fun place for her. This might not be her passion project, but it's certainly fun from a girl's standpoint to see her talking about clothes.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun for her. One of the things that Princesses of Wales do very well, and late Diana, Princess of Wales, did extremely well, was promote British fashions. And if you can't get an attractive lady promoting British fashions, who are you going to get? And in the same way, late Queen did exactly the same, promoting British fashions. She did it slightly differently. She was of an age where she had to dress accordingly, but from the time that her mother passed away in 2000, March 2000, her whole wardrobe changed. They came bright colors, emerald green, canary yellow, fuchsia red, royal blue. You could see her from the moon. And she always said, I need to be seen to be believed. And my goodness, you could see her. And she set a trend for the older woman. Catherine sets a trend for the younger woman. And if they can't promote British fashions, who can? And they do a very good job at it.
Robert, it's nice to see the Princess of Wales out and about. It really does give you the confidence that she's feeling better.
Yeah, it does. I think we should, again, limit our expectations. I think that it's important that she has time to get well, make sure that she's completely rebuilt and feels it perfect in the way her health is. That's more important than anything else. And I also think it's about staging this as well, because we have to be brutally honest that His Majesty will last as long as he lasts, and he will carry on doing his job until the day he drops. But we do know that one thing is certain is that both William and Catherine will have a very long period of time, we think, in that top job, top role, and that can be quite draining. And they have a young family, so I think the most important thing for her at the moment is, yes, do the jobs that she's got to do, and the media will have their expectations, but making sure that she has enough time with a young family, because they are young. And when as the Queen showed when she was quite young and she came to the throne in her 20s, it's important those children get that time. And I think that's where William and Catherine are getting the balance right. They know what's ahead of them, and they know it's going to be it's a long period of time where there's going to be a lot of expectations upon them.
I think one
Dickie,
of the things that Catherine learned during this period where she was undergoing treatment for the cancer and then having finished the treatment in September is to pace herself. Very
Mm.
important that she paces herself because you rightly say, Rob, she does have a young family. They want their mum around. William wants his wife around. And the only way that's going to happen is not doing anything and everything, but pacing yourself and doing quality things and making quality statements. Very important, not just for her, but for the whole of the system of monarchy.
I
And the
mean,
good thing is, and the good thing there is that it does seem both the media and the palace have learnt that from the recent experience. Maybe having a double blow of both the king and Catherine being undergoing treatment at the same time has made people realise that their expectations have got to be managed. Although I do think with the king, this he has been very, very loaded, not necessarily by the palace, but probably more by himself. He probably does too much, I think.
Poor King
Well,
Charles.
Camilla will take a hand in that to try and rein him in, but
But
it's
it's
very
just not
difficult to
working
rein
really
him
at the
in.
moment.
You know,
Yeah.
just a few weeks ago, he had nothing to do on a Thursday night. He took himself off to the Pirates of Penzance.
Yeah. But
There's
I
no
mean, there's
keeping
things
him
like that,
down.
Dickie. I mean, I was at the palace quite recently, and it was almost like there was a garden party in the throne room, in the big main reception because they had a big reception, but there were like might be about 600 people in there, and then the Queen was doing a separate one, which she probably had a more manageable 60 people, but the King was just working his way through the entire. He seemed to be in his element, to be fair, but I thought, that's a hell of a lot for him to be doing, standing alone, just working his way through the room. And he was making sure he saw as many people as possible. But the Queen, had managed her room in the throne room with about 80 people. So she'd worked it out that she wasn't going to do the same length as him. But that's just him, I think.
I love hearing that. It gives you the idea of how similar he is to his mother, Queen Elizabeth, that just
Yeah.
selfless nature, and
I
then
Very
don't
much
think the
so.
Queen, and I don't think the Queen would have done it quite that. That's what I mean. I think there would have been fewer people in that reception. I mean, I think he's really making I mean, something he said he would do is making Buckingham Palace like a working office or a working place where people would come and have that experience because not many people get that experience. But you're packing them in. He's making sure these receptions are massive affairs,
Yeah, Rob is
and it's
absolutely
quite
right.
interesting.
Rob is absolutely right because with the king, they are packed in. With the late Queen, I don't think there were anything more than 250 people at a
Yeah,
reception.
oh,
yeah,
And she did have the help of other members of the royal family, so she
yeah.
wasn't alone. But with the king, he just wants to meet people. He wants to be with the people,
Yeah, I
and
think
that's
it's it. Yeah, it's his moment, really. I think it is his moment, and I think as king, and he realizes that that moment may not be, a long period of time, but he's certainly doing things in that time, and the palace is being used in a way that perhaps in the latter years of Her Majesty's reign it wasn't being used in that same way. It wasn't. It was more structured, and he really is. Having maybe two a week of these receptions. I mean, it really is quite, it's quite strange. 1 minute it's for the media, 1 minute it's for the film industry, another time it's for people with cancer. It's quite interesting ways, and the numbers are very, very high. You go into these engagements and you sort of trying to get in position, and he's in the middle of it all like a scrum. It's like a big scrum. It's quite impressive actually the way he's doing it.
well, I
and
mean,
there's none of this. You can't touch the monarch. I mean, people hug him, and
yeah.
he
Yeah, they
hugs
do.
them back.
Yeah, yeah. It is different. It is a different situation. I mean,
Yeah,
I remember going. I mean, Dickie, the back room. I can't remember what it's called, where you go through it onto the back steps of the palace when you're going out. That's a lot of the
mm,
receptions used to be held there with the Queen, but He's in the main room a lot of the time with
yeah,
hundreds of people, and that is a very
yeah.
different feel about it. But I understand why he's doing it. He's getting to more people, and that's what he wants to do.
It's very different where even with William and Catherine, who we've talked about managing expectations, but they do seem like they are trying to make an impact in the social media, in the digital
Yeah,
space with like
yeah,
this new video series where King Charles really still believes in the magic of word of
yeah,
mouth, like the woman that walks away and said he recognized the colors on my dress. I feel so
Yeah,
special.
yeah.
You're seeing that he's making an impact. People are so excited to meet him. They're walking away and they're saying, "What an incredible man. I feel I'm so charmed by him." So it is a difference in generations, I think. And I wonder if William and Catherine will adapt in any way to the king's strategy.
I hope they do. I hope they do. I hope they do for the reason that going back to my late mum, it's the experience of being in the place, of being, of talking to, having the experience. I think social media is great at getting a reach, and I don't dismiss that in any way, what shape or form. But it's not the same as smelling the roses, or I think she did. I think or just looking at the plants, or being down by the lake where the flamingos used to be. It's all of those sort of things. I think that people remember. And it's important to have that interaction, even if it was to say hello. And I understand social media, but it's not the same. And I think that hopefully William and Catherine, I'm sure they will realise that that's what the King's trying to achieve. It's meeting people.
You've got to remember that Charles had sort of 53 years preparing for this particular role. And within those years, let's go right back to the mid 1970s when he formed the Prince's Trust, an organization that's dealt with hundreds of thousands of young people. And I saw him at engagements where he would dive in with the youngsters and be smothered by them and talk to them in much the same way as he's talking to people today. So he's had a lot of practice at it. William hasn't had that sort of practice. He had several years in the Royal Air Force. Then he flew an air ambulance. Then he started finding his footing on the Royal Road. Then as a whammy, his wife is diagnosed with a cancer, and that pulled him back a bit. He will make good, but he needs the time. His father had the time. William hopefully will also have that time, but it depends how well his father will carry on.
I think that's the thing about the King is that he's an incredibly special person. I mean, Dickie obviously worked alongside him, as well as the late Princess who was. I just think, and the Majesty, but I think that he has a unique ability to bond with people. He is somebody that is at ease in other people's company. He's somebody that can relate, and you got to remember also that people. Like even CEOs of big banks and that, they sometimes, I remember meeting somebody who was, used to go off to a New York bank, he used to go off to Harlem and just go into a school and listen to what the kids are saying because he was so in his ivory tower, unless he did that, he didn't listen to what was going on. And they can learn, even, the King will learn by talking to people. He'll understand what actually people are thinking by talking to people. Otherwise, he's listening to politicians, he's listening to other heads of state, and they're not necessarily the people that really are passing on their angst or their worries about what the world's happening. And he wants to know. And I think that's something that he's able to bring to the table better than anybody else. And that's why when he can pass that on to politicians who aren't listening in the same way that he does.
And he had a knack of listening to young people. I remember that Prince's Trust, they used to have a holiday camp up in Great Yarmouth on the East Coast, and they'd take about 100 youngsters there for a week. They'd arrive there surly. They didn't want to be there. They were young offenders out on license in the care of the Prince's Trust. But by the end of the week, they were all working together. And I went several years with Charles when he was Prince of Wales to Caister, to this holiday camp, and they swarmed around him. One year, Frank Bruno was there. They loved him when Charles and Frank Bruno sparred together. Another occasion, Phil Collins was there. Charles sat behind the drums and bashed the drum. It wasn't very good, but my goodness, the youngsters loved it. So he's been able to communicate with these young people, and he's carrying him through with the people today. And that is his legacy to his reign.
I love that. Everyone that I have met that has met him, even briefly, say that he's so personable and will say, "Where did you come from?" He knows exactly where they came from on a map. He'll ask them about something specific about their town or their state. He's. I don't think we give him enough credit for how truly brilliant he is, as well as being a wonderful communicator. He's just clearly a very intelligent man. But let's talk about somebody who's not. That's Prince Harry. We'll wrap it up.
Back at him again.
We'll wrap it up with this one because Dickie, I've been disappointed that this story hasn't received more traction. To me, it's appalling that Prince Harry hasn't stepped down from the African Parks charity after Sherry Blair's firm did an independent investigation and found that there was some inappropriate behavior. Locals accusing African Parks rangers of beating, waterboarding, and assault. This is incredibly serious. Why do you think Prince Harry has yet to step down or acknowledge this new report?
Well, it's the same question you've got to ask. Well, why did he step down from Centre Bali and yet he's still on the board of African Parks? What people don't seem to understand, yes, their indigenous population are being brutalized by people who work for the national parks. Africa is still, in the 21st century, still very tribal. We got rid of it in the War of the Roses in the 15th century. the only tribal conflict we have today is on the football field. That is very tribal. But in the African continent, might is right. And if one group are stronger than the other, they will abuse them. And it's unfortunate. That is a way of life there. And it'll take years and decades. But it is appalling that he is still on the board there. It is appalling that he said nothing. He was very quick to say something about Sentabali, but he said nothing about what is going on in national parks in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And double standards, isn't it?
Well, it's never complain, never explain if it's convenient to you. But if it's not convenient, then you complain about it on your Netflix docuseries. Yeah, because Dr. Sophie Shandaka said she was shocked and did not see Prince Harry's statement coming. She wasn't warned that it was, about to drop. And so she felt this overwhelming anxiety when it came to the negativity she received on social media and all of the random press inquiries that were generated based on Prince Harry's statement. Why not just say I'm disappointed in this and I'm going to do everything in my power to try to change course. If you don't want to step down, at least acknowledge that there need to be changes made.
They set their own agenda to what they want to do. He used to talk about not warning about the statement that he was going to release. He didn't warn his family that he and Meghan were going on Oprah. Mm-hmm. We got a taste of what they were going to do in Netflix, and we got a taste of carrying on with the book Spare. They just do things the way they want to do them. They don't care about anybody. They probably don't. I wonder if they care about each other. They put in this lovey-dovey show in public. What are they like behind closed doors? We don't know. We will perhaps know in the fullness of time. I do find it very surprising, very disappointing that he hasn't said anything about the abuse shown by the national parks employees to the Baka indigenous population.
Rob Job
it's coming up for their 7th anniversary, isn't it? Harry and Meghan, isn't it? 7-year itch or something. Yeah. It's coming up soon, isn't it?
Is that what they call that? No, the when it comes to Prince Harry and Senabale, I suspect that he doesn't want to step down from African Parks Charity because it's so soon after the Senabale scandal, and people will start really asking, what does this guy do other than sue people?
Well, I mean, that's been a big question. Yeah. Go on, you speak, Dickie. Go on.
Yeah, the point is, he stepped down to Sentabali. Lesotho had a British connection during the colonial days. The Democratic Republic of the Congo had no British connection. It was a Belgian protectorate. So why is he on the board of that organization in a country that had no connections to the UK, and yet he stood down from a board that has that?
But who's the other thing is when he was a prince, well, I mean, he's still technically a prince, but there would have been other people doing the due diligence. And they seem to have not done the due diligence. This sort of thing won't have been a new thing that's been happening. No. This, as Dickie was saying, this is an issue that's been obviously under the radar for some time, and really he should probably not have got involved in the first place. But it's all about decisions being made, and they are protected. Members of the royal family are protected by the system and being by part of the system by people doing that due diligence for them, making sure they're not going to be put into a situation that's difficult. And he hasn't got that anymore. So you see he sort of lurches from one to the other, it seems to me, and that's a shame because in his heyday he was quite a good communicator with the people. Actually, he used to get good reactions when he was going around representing the country and representing the Queen, the late Queen, and it seems to have all gone to waste, in my opinion. He was, the most popular member of the royal family once, and he's just all of that has gone to waste. And he did a lot of good work, I think, in his past.
Dickie, does it say anything to you that since they've moved to the United States, their portfolio hasn't really grown when it comes to new charities that they're affiliated with? That he can't say, well, I might not be a part of Senabale or African Parks Charity anymore, but I have this, and this on my agenda to keep me busy. I spoke to an author that said charities have rejected the Sussexes since they've moved to the States because they don't see the value in that association. They're no longer working members of the royal family.
Well, they're a toxic couple, aren't they? That anything they touch seems to go wrong. Meghan starts a project and it goes wrong. She puts a name down and finds that somebody else is using it or it breaches copyright. So nothing goes right. And I can understand why Americans don't want to touch them. Where they go from here, I really don't know. It seems as though Meghan is the one desperate to be a star, and Harry desperate to be a house husband.
A Real Housewife, Rob Job. Would you watch Real Housewives of Montecito? A Real Housewives?
It could well be the next. It could well be the next Netflix documentary, can it? The Real Housewife, the Royal Housewife of Montecito. But look, a house husband. Look, I actually think that actually from what I've seen of Meghan lately, she actually appears fairly happy with what her lot and how it's all working out for her, because that's really essentially, apart from Suits, is what she was doing before she met Harry. She seems to be doing what she likes doing, whereas he looks thoroughly miserable, doesn't he? I mean, he just doesn't look like a happy bunny at all. He just seems to be, he's forever whinging, forever moaning about his lot and spending millions of pounds on legal cases. It's not a good thing to be doing. He's not, I don't, as Dickie said, what is he doing with his time? He doesn't seem to have a mission. Whereas before, I remember speaking to him on a plane when he was going on his way to New Zealand, and he was, talking about, trying to help the veterans, do more for the veterans. He was going to go and speak to this surgeon who was dealing with how, prosthetics and how need to have to grow the bone longer on on the, they extend the bone on the legs so they can make them more effective. He was really involved in a lot of things that made a difference to people's lives. And what has he done since then? He has wasted an opportunity where he could have really done a lot for people because, because of that royal status, he was able to be able to get governments involved and get bang heads together in the medical profession. People are just not going to do that for him now. And that must be a real blow for him because before he had influence. I don't think he's got a lot of influence anymore. I really
I
don't.
don't think he's got any influence, actually.
Mm.
He
Yeah.
might be a prince of the United Kingdom, but that's all he is.
Yeah.
Dickie, from a PR perspective, I wonder if do you see the optics, how bad the optics are when someone does a very tense interview with the BBC and says, I'm fearful for my life, my children are in jeopardy, and then a week later they leave their kids at home so they can go to the Beyonce concert? Like, do you or their
Well,
photographs
you've got to
bringing
look at
up
the
wealth?
optics that while he was over here, he went to see a friend and couldn't remember where the friend lived. So he knocked on so many doors and he was captured on a video doorbell, asking if so and so lived there. If he's fearful for his life, then what was he doing running up and down the street looking for his friends?
Who is advising them is my question to you, because if you were advising a young Prince Harry, wouldn't you say this is not a good look?
Well,
Well, I
yes.
mean, but they got to take advice. It's all you can have the best advisors in the world, but if you don't take the advice, it's pointless.
And this has been the problem with the royals in the past, that they seek advice and you give the advice and they don't take it. They've learnt their lessons.
And that's not just Harry. I mean, that's not just Harry. That's all. I mean, a lot of them. But I mean, I think that you could have the best. I mean, we're seeing it now with other political figures, aren't we? I mean, I can't imagine that the president is. He's probably got the best available advice to him. He doesn't necessarily listen, but the reality is with Harry, they're making their decisions, and their advisors can only go so far.
Well, they've gone through a few of them, haven't they?
They have.
Yeah.
They have. And now they have Bill Gates for former assistant. We'll see how long she lasts. The countdown is
Yeah,
on.
watch this space.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope that Harry listens in, Kinsey, now and again, because some of the advice that Dickie's given, his many years of experience, both from within. I've done nearly 35 years or more than that of reporting about this. What he doesn't seem to be doing is listening. And if he really wants a reconciliation to his father, all I would do is emphasize one, forgiveness may not come straight away, but you've got to apologize. Just say sorry, Dad. And that is a start. And I just wish someone, I mean, because otherwise we will be talking about this endlessly, and it'll be something that goes on beyond to the next generation, and it'll be a constant, distraction from what the royal family are actually about.
And let's not forget, it's not just about saying sorry to his dad, but it's also saying sorry to his brother and his sister-in-law, because
I,
he's
I
rubbish them
yeah,
as well.
yeah, I can't see that one ever healing personally, but there we are.
Yeah,
I think dads forgive their children. I think brothers. We've seen a lot of examples of siblings at war, which very few tend to end. They don't always end in the best way.
Dickie is a glass half full kind of guy, though, and that's why we love him. Don't
Yeah.
Rob Job.
Oh, we love Dickie. Yeah, we know that Dickie, but Dickie's a good advisor. See, I mean, personally, he did a very good job when I was a reporter. And he was dealing with well, I still reported, but when I was dealing in the 90s, 92, whenever that time, very, very tricky time when you got the split of the Prince and Princess of Wales, and you're dealing with the impossible, and so there are ways out of this. Look at the King now. I was actually thinking that when we were discussing how well the King has done. He has done remarkably well from when that time when he'd be going walkabouts, people were shouting at him and throwing things at him and said you got half the clergy said he'd never be fit to be king. Now they're all sort of eating out of his hand. Just
Well,
shows you what time can
look at
do.
the French when he went to Paris shouting out "Vive le roi." They got
Yeah,
rid of this 200 years ago. But I'll give you
yeah.
a little story to finish off with, talking about the royals listening to advice. I went to a meeting after Charles and Diana separated, and I had a meeting once a week with her and a private secretary. And at the end of the meeting, she said, "I'd like to hold a reception at Kensington Palace for the England football team." I said, "Well, very commendable, man, but why? They lost." And she sort of thought about it. I said, "You do realize, without her letting catch breath, that if you do one for the England team who lost, then you've got to do every sport that England are represented in if they lose. Do you want to be seen as a loser?" And she thought about this. She said, "No, I think you're right." And she didn't invite them, but she wouldn't talk to me for 2 weeks after that
Well,
because
Yeah,
she
that's
got.
it. They
that is
don't always. They want the advice, but they don't always want to hear it. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
that is hilarious, and it gives you a little insight into why Prince Harry has become this participation trophy prince. Mom must have been like, "Yay!" no matter what, which is okay. All right, agree with us, disagree with us. Let us know in the comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this chat with a friend. Dickie Arbiter, I love your ties. I can't wait to see the next tie. Thank you so much for your time today. And Robert Jobson, it was such a pleasure to speak to you two and get now I have a mental map of the palace in my head thanks to your
No,
description. So
well,
that was
yeah,
fun.
I got it wrong most of it.
And I enjoyed your company. Thank you so much for talking to me today.